Hi everyone, my name is Lauren Scholler. I am a board member with Miles4Hips, and for our team week, I am joined by Katie McGinnis, who is a child life specialist in Zambia, and I am really looking forward to learning more and having a discussion about the role of child life specialists and how they can support kids and parents going through surgery. Thank you
Thank
for
you so
joining
much.
us.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So to start, can you share what child life specialists do and the training that is involved to become a child life specialist?
Yeah. So, child life specialists can be found all over the world, and our primary job is to help minimize the negative impacts and trauma of medical situations or hospitalizations, healthcare experiences, things like that for kids and young adults. And different countries in the world have different maybe titles for child life specialists and different certification requirements. But in the States, you have to have a bachelor's degree in a certain field related to child life. You have to undergo a very rigorous internship with so many hours. You have to sit for the board certification exam to become a certified child life specialist. And these days, it's not required, but most, or the majority, I would say, of child life specialists also have a master's degree. So you can actually get an undergrad and a master's degree in child life, or you can get it in a related field with, certain coursework, things like that.
That's great and absolutely a very important role that they play in the hospital setting. And kind of along with that, what motivated you to become a child life specialist?
Yeah. Well, I've been a child life specialist for about 15 years. So the first 6 years of my career was spent in the States, working in a couple different children's hospitals. And then I moved to work in an international setting. So I've been working in a few different African countries for the last 10 years and 7 in Zambia. But when I was growing up, I always knew I wanted to do something in pediatrics in a hospital setting. I didn't actually know about child life until my senior year of college. So I was pre-med, thought I wanted to be a pediatric oncologist. And the more I was kind of in the hospital and studying for the MCATs, I really just felt like there was a piece missing, and I really wanted to focus on psychosocial care with kids. And so thankfully, I heard about child life and knew immediately that that is what I was meant to do and I was passionate about. And I have loved every single day of my career as a child life specialist. I love working with kids. I love helping them understand and overcome really difficult experiences. I love watching them cope well with really hard things. I love helping support families of kids that are hospitalized or going through medical experiences. So it's something I'm really passionate about and absolutely love our field.
That's amazing. I'm so glad you found that path for yourself.
Thanks.
And I wanted to talk about this from a couple of different perspectives. And, the first one being from what you know about supporting children through these difficult hospital experiences, how can parents prepare their kids to undergo surgery or treatments such as, in the hip dysplasia world, you look at the Pavlik harness and different like bracing and casting treatments like that?
Yeah, so the diagnosis of hip dysplasia can be extremely overwhelming for parents of infants that are newly diagnosed, parents of children and teenagers who are newly diagnosed, and even for young adults and adults, to be honest, who are newly diagnosed. And there's just a lot of short-term and long-term implications. And so there's a lot of support that needs to be provided to parents, kids, adolescents, and even young adults and adults as well. So as a child life specialist, some of the ways that I would really like to support families with a new hip dysplasia diagnosis would be through diagnosis teaching, first of all. So the more parents know and understand about their child's condition, And then especially the more that children and adolescents can understand about this, complicated diagnosis and the treatment options and how long they'll last and what kind of different stages of treatment are required and if surgical intervention is required and at what point in, the child's life or adult's life, and then what the recovery process is like. So that psychological preparation is so critical because it can be really overwhelming for families. They don't know what questions to ask. They don't know what they don't know. And so providing that diagnosis education, but also preparation for what the journey is going to look like helps. If you're a parent, it helps you gain kind of a sense of mastery and control over, okay, this is what my child needs. This is how I can support them. This is what our journey is going to look like. And then children desperately need information about their bodies, about, their diagnosis and what's going to happen to their body and what treatment's required. And they need to know that information in a developmentally appropriate way. So how you would talk to a 3-year-old about a hip dysplasia diagnosis is very different than how you talk to a teenager. But that's what child life specialists excel in, is how to tailor complicated diagnoses and information and treatment plans down to a child's individual level, and also help support families in that. So one thing we know from research in child life is that parental anxiety has a direct effect on children's anxiety in healthcare. And so it's really important to work with the family unit together, because if you can help decrease a parent's anxiety about this diagnosis and treatment options, then you're automatically going to help reduce children's anxiety, even if you're talking about infants, because infants can still sense and feed off of parents' anxiety. So supporting the whole family is really important. And then also thinking about if surgical interventions are required. Usually the surgeries are big and they're pretty rare. And so there's not a ton of information out there for the general population on a PAO or an FO or some of the different types of surgeries. And so that what to expect kind of pre-op, during hospitalization, and also in the lengthy post-op period is really critical, because these are not just normal surgeries that kids and adolescents and young adults are going through. And so parents and children need to be prepared for exactly what to expect kind of at every stage in the process. And they need to be given a chance to ask questions and clear up misconceptions and express their fears and anxieties, because it's really overwhelming diagnosis. So those are some of the different ways child life specialists can support, in addition to coping skills development and helping facilitate connection. Mental health support is so important for parents that have a child that's newly diagnosed with hip dysplasia, or children and adolescents going through this, how it will impact their school or their work or things like that. And so linking them to community supports and mental health supports and support groups and social media connections and things like that are all also really critical elements. So there is so much that child life specialists can do to help parents and kids with this diagnosis.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. So important in all aspects of the diagnosis, treatment, and just the whole journey that kids go on after they receive a diagnosis related to hip dysplasia or really any other medical condition. On kind of the opposite end of that, and you may have touched on it a little bit, but if there's anything else you want to add, how can a parent who is about to undergo surgery prepare their child for what they can expect to see as that parent goes through their recovery and their surgery?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is to check and see if the hospital where your child is having surgery has a child life specialist department. Almost all children's hospitals and even a lot of children's kind of within adult systems have child life specialists now. And so that's the first thing I would do, is ask and see if the surgeon can put in a referral for a child life specialist. A lot of hospitals do pre-op preparation. And so sometimes that involves parents and a child going in person to the hospital before to do a pre-op tour where they can see the surgical areas, and they find out more about what will happen in pre-op and in the OR, and then also in PACU and when they get to the floor. And things like that. And so those services can be so valuable for kids, because what we know is the more you prepare them ahead of time and give them age-appropriate information, the better they will cope with a big thing like a hospitalization. And even if it's an infant or a toddler having a surgery, child life specialists very much support babies and toddlers as well, and can give parents great, advice for how to make the hospital experience as easy as possible for their child. Oftentimes bringing comfort items from home for younger kids and even teenagers, actually. They can talk through kind of a coping plan. So what's the coping plan for the child, during hospitalization, and actually as they transition, as they're discharged and transition back home. So that's definitely something I would say. If your hospital or facility does not have a child life specialist, there are some resources online. You can just Google how to prepare a child for surgery. And, what it boils down to is kids need information. And so giving that to them in an age-appropriate, developmentally appropriate way is the most important thing. And giving them that chance to ask questions about what will happen to them and what things will feel like and what they'll see. So talking about their senses, what they'll hear in the hospital, and what things will feel like, and all those kinds of things. And then giving them a chance to ask questions and express their fears. Any parent can do that with a little bit of guidance. And so those are some of the tips that I would recommend if a parent has a child that's newly diagnosed.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing that as well. And this has been very insightful. I think just knowing that child life specialists are there as a resource for children through adolescence, and that there's a role for preparing children to undergo these surgeries, and also the role of the parent as well, because these surgeries, they're a big deal, and they're a lot to go through and a lot to process. And so knowing that there is that support available to help patients and families is really important. And I think we're really excited to have you as a voice to be able to share that with the Miles4Hips community. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it and happy to help.